I want to thank every Amazon employee and every Amazon customer because you guys paid for all this.
For fuck's sake.
Oh, Jeff Bezos, just recently in that clip, returning from not going to space, thanking, in fairness, he thanked the town, but also thanked his employees and we, the unwashed masses who have been handing over our money for years. And, well, good on him, I guess. Advancing the cause on our behalf or something like that. So welcome to another episode of the FFS Talk podcast. It is August 3rd, 2021, as we record today's episode, which is about standing on the shoulders of giants. And if you are familiar with Sir Isaac Newton's letter to Robert Hooke, I think it's Robert Hooke, right? He mentioned that he and Hooke were in kind of feuding. They had a rivalry. Pardon me. And so he said that if I have seen further, it is because I have stood on the shoulders of giants, I believe it was. So I can stick a link in the show notes to there's an article with the actual letter. Sometimes you'll see it written as standing upon the shoulders of giants, but I believe he did write on the shoulders of giants. So, and if he has seen further, by the way, and technically, if you have seen farther, if he intended that to mean physically farther, but as you, faithful listener, know, further is when you further your education or you further an agenda or so it's not a physical distance. It's more of a metaphorical one. So good on him for, I don't know if there were the two meanings at the time. I didn't delve into it that much. I'll leave that to you. But yes, further. To further your education, you must walk farther. Something like that. So the standing on the shoulders of giants, the notion is that it's very difficult to come up with something brand new. And by the way, there's no hosting. I mean, there's no host. That may be true also. There's no guest to talk to about this today, but someday somebody will take the plunge. But for now, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. The podcasting notion, for example, comes from Adam Curry, like him or not. I do like that. He did invent the notion of podcasting, and it definitely took off slowly at first, but thanks to Joe Rogan and Clubhouse, which are both given credit for some reason for inventing, various people have received credit, but surely standing on the shoulders of Adam Curry. And then he himself came from broadcasting. He was an MTV VJ, and certainly the notion of radio broadcasting had been around for quite a while. So, and really, podcasting is just another form of storytelling, right? Sharing a tale. That's how you pass along ideas and history, the use of language. So, it was a evolutionary, maybe a little bit revolutionary, but certainly standing on the shoulders of giants, another example there. The reason I'm calling out Jeff Bezos here today, many people were picking on him for the hat, and I understand that he, as a child, was somehow involved in maybe his grandmother's ranch or something. He was somehow doing the work with cows or other ranch or farm animals of some sort. So, whatever. But the interesting thing was that he did thank a very limited set of people, and this is not to under applaud his engineering on his Blue Origin rocket and much hay was made of the design of the rocket and what it looked like. But hey, that's how rockets are. That goes back to some other famous rockets that were designed through history. Because guess what? That was not the first rocket. And while Amazon customers like myself and maybe you put money in his pocket to pursue this, there were tens of thousands of people involved in making his journey, not quite to space, possible. His engineering team, of course, and hopefully he thanked them at some point with something other than Amazon gift cards. But we're talking the invention of gunpowder in China, however many thousands of years ago, and the space program in America, the competition between the United States and the Soviet Union at the time, back in the 50s and 60s, and the ongoing exploration of space. And you could even throw in some of the work of Gene Roddenberry and others who inspired some of these ideas and some of the drive, and the likes of Neil deGrasse Tyson, or any teachers out there, or anybody who is keeping the dream alive. Pardon me. You hear my allergies. I'm standing on the shoulders of an allergic giant. So this is something that I think becomes important, and the reason it's on the topic arc, because so often people do not understand from where their favorite things, their technologies, their concepts, their ideas come. They lose track of the history, and so they don't know the why or the how. They just know the what. You can look at symbology. There are certain symbols that have been taken over. They've been not culturally appropriated, but ideologically appropriated, I suppose. And you can think of a couple off the top of your head that they've been around for hundreds, thousands of years, and suddenly their meaning has changed because they themselves are taken over. If we look at the modern day, as I speak today, this show is produced in Las Vegas. The Clark County, in which Las Vegas rests, is on the list of hotspots, I guess. By population, I say we like I'm staying home, but by population, we are not putting up big giant numbers, but we are showing a steep percentage increase in test positivity and hospitalizations and whatnot. But the important thing is the tourism and the fact that the policy on vaccination checks of any kind, of mask wearing and whatnot, on June 1st were completely lifted. There was no, you got to have your driver's license to go into a bar or a casino in Vegas, but we'll trust you that you're vaccinated and not infecting others. So that's a little editorializing there. But some of the problem that we're getting with the vaccination rates not all, some of it comes from a misunderstanding of history, a misunderstanding of how the science of vaccinations work, of how testing and development of a vaccination platform like mRNA, which is the new big thing. What does it mean to get an emergency use authorization? So all of these factors that are a part of either the pro or anti-vaxxer side of the fence have history behind them. The mRNA platform development on it began, from what I understand, was sometime around or soon after the first SARS-CoV-1, I guess, outbreak, which was short-lived, but which got everybody's attention. I remember I was working at UMax at the time, and we had a parent company in Taiwan, and so some of our employees would travel, and there was some concern about traveling to Taiwan or anywhere in Southeast or South or East Asia, anywhere. anywhere where the I think it was also in Hong Kong, and so the SARS outbreak lit the fuse, or lighted the fuse, I guess, if you want to be pedantic, lighted the fuse for this the search for a vaccination platform. And I am not going to quote him, but there is a person that I myself know from my college days who is involved with one of the companies, and his comment was, and a conspiracy theorist might run with this, but his comment was, we were at a point where we were, going to start testing, and this happened, right? So it was fortuitous, and so conspiracy theories will enter sprints from that. But the fact is that those platforms are built on a history of vaccine development, immunology and virology, and of course, everybody's an expert now in epidemiology. So these are all sciences that are built on history. Edward Jenner kind of kicked off the whole vaccination thing with smallpox. And if you want to read an interesting conspiracy story where he tried it out on a kid and hoped for the best, right? That is quite different from where we are today, and yet that does seem to be one of the concerns. And there's a Tuskegee component, and there's a very unfortunate statistical alignment in different communities in the country, and so all these things are adding up that fuel conspiracy theories, which my opinion, don't get helped when people don't know how we got to point B, point D, point J along, from A to Z. It's a weird analogy, but yeah. So if we rely on some familiar reference or motivated reasoning, as they say, somebody may draw a picture that says, this vaccine is experimental, therefore unsafe. When in fact, EUA from the FDA requires the testing that it went through, and the platform itself was in development for years, decades, at least a decade. So by not understanding the giants on which these developments are based, right? The history of the science and the math and the understanding and the testing and a lot that was learned about vaccination, and certainly about the pandemics that have gone on before. Likewise, everybody now has a cell phone in their pocket. And when I say everybody, I am not assuming universality, but certainly they're quite popular now. There was a time when, maybe you listening remember this time, when you had a 1 in your cell phone number because it was a long distance call, and there was a per minute charges, and people would the 1 in your phone call in your number made it a long distance call so that the caller would be charged a fee. Or you had the per minute stuff, or you had fixed voicemails, and there's just a whole mess of things that are legacy, throwback, like can't believe that's how things used to be. And that's even before phones were briefcase sized, and forget about range, forget about cell access, right? And then remember when phones had to be plugged into the wall? That's crazy. So the entire history of telephony services and the system of telegraph wires and the entire notion of sending messages on wires, right? Electrical. And then we got to podcasting before with the radio. So all of the history of all these things is so often lost, so that it is often suggested that the icons that we use today on our devices, the floppy disk to indicate saving, which I think that's fading away, but the notion of a handset and a phone base is fading, certainly outside of work. Does anyone really, I can't speak for everybody, obviously, but does anyone really buy a phone that plugs into a wall anymore? And if you do, it's usually a cordless handset with the keypad in it, right? So the entire notion of copy paste, all these things, they are built on a history of familiarity, and that history may be fading. Certainly, there are occasionally the proof of age question has jokingly it's been suggested that if you show someone a cassette tape and a pencil and you say, "What do you do with these?" and that will help differentiate age groups, which is probably true. So, by not understanding the historical implications of, or I should say the implications of the history, how about that, of how we have arrived at certain things, it is dangerously simple to, well, sometimes it results in catastrophic case fatality numbers that are back on the rise. Sometimes it's more misattributing invention to the likes of a billionaire or two. Sometimes it's just not knowing where things come from. And so the question then is, do we suffer this lack of historical awareness? I suggest that we do. And this goes back to some of the topic arc that this would fit into. Goes to news and sharing of good data. How do you know that something that is in the news today is relevant to something from yesterday and then tomorrow? And are we using the technology at our disposal to enable access to these things? For example, if you were going to check, if you were just curious, hey, Jeff Bezos just thanked his customers' employees, that seemed kind of cringe. Do you even know where, do you know that you should or could, that there is something to research, right? Should he be thanking, if he's going to be thanking people, shouldn't he be thanking all of the JPL team that invented rocket fuels, or certainly developed them, from Caltech that formed JPL? Or how about the V1 and V2, certainly V2 team that eventually made their way to America, paperclip, to enable the U.S. space program? Or how about all the stuff that the Soviet Union at the time learned and no doubt got smuggled out to America, and maybe vice versa? And again, like I said, the entire notion of gunpowder and all that entails through history, and however much death that's caused, but certainly inspired as well, not only fireworks, but eventually travel, putting people in space, or in some cases not quite into space. So just knowing how these things have come together, there's, as I mentioned, the Isaac Newton, and then Sir Isaac Newton quote, and he's got many, just knowing all that entails, and not using the apple falling on his head, which isn't actually true. Arguably, he was near an apple tree at some points, pondering, but just knowing what does it mean to attack a problem in a new way, like he did, and not everybody's going to develop an entire system of mathematics, which he arguably developed at the same time as what's his name, Leibniz. I'll put a link in the show notes, and I'll let you pronounce it correctly. But yes, some controversy over the origin story, but Isaac Newton is often revered for inventing calculus and for various other accomplishments. surviving the the pandemic of the day. That's another bit of history to reflect on. And it makes you wonder, if you understand that, this is some free will thinking, if there was a general understanding of what someone like that accomplished during a time like we are enjoying now, would teaching students, would learning from home be such a hot topic? Or would the potential for actual advancement of just even one's own agenda be realistically considered a possibility, right? Like, hey, not everyone's going to go invent a new form of calculus or other mathematics. You're not going to go invent the next iteration of blockchain, or you're not going to write your own computer programming language, although you might accomplish any of those things, but that's not what one would expect. But certainly, when you know that a great many things were accomplished by people in, well, not only adverse situations, but without a cell phone, without a computer, without a lot of things. You can look at telescopes and drawings of helicopters and a variety of other early developments that were, however they were inspired. And surely there's a story behind each and everything that's been developed over time. If you look at the hieroglyphics on the wall paintings in Egypt, there's all kinds of stuff going on. There's the way the Nile was flooding, and the construction of the pyramids, which is still one of those controversies which maybe has been addressed. Maybe it's still left to consider. But all of these things have a history, and when we don't look at the giants that are standing under the figurehead at the top, we may easily lose track of not only how things come together, but why and what that all means. That seems like a weak conclusion to that, but what I'm saying is, if you don't consider something like how the pyramids were built, right? That's like a physical manifestation of standing on the shoulder. How do you build something that big without a crane, without a mechanized equipment to move these huge blocks and all that? So, if you can hear that, I'm sorry. How can that possibly happen? So if you don't have the intellectual curiosity that it takes to delve into that, just a little bit, if you're curious, but instead you believe, ancient aliens and the Sumerians were from another planet and they built, it's very easy to go down that path and never question it. And that's how you arrive at certain conspiracy theories. This is my assessment. You arrive at certain conspiracy theories which are based in almost entirely, sometimes, on a lack of complete understanding of that history, the past. Today I was listening to an old clip from Bill Burr, comedian Bill Burr, and he was reading an email that somebody sent him about the flat earth and the theory as he was expressing it, and it eventually went off the rails, and Bill Burr had to, I think he said, all right, I'm out at the end. The interesting thing is that Bill Burr is a helicopter pilot, so he was actually reading the letter or email that he had received with a seed of curiosity, like how is this person constructing their argument? Because certainly visual inspection provides a certain amount of credibility to the notion that the Earth is not flat. That is, it is a globe. Time and time again, the flat Earth theories and arguments have been shown to be somewhat ridiculous. Today, as I speak, August 3rd, I believe, was the day that Christopher Columbus, which really he doesn't deserve much credit for much, and that's yet another example. But today, I believe, was In 1492, he set sail, ocean blue, the whole nine, to go discover a place with that already had people on it, and then to do awful things. So this is not a shout out to Christopher Columbus, but to say, speaking of, he did arrive in the Indies, West Indies, not on the actual continental, North American continent. I'll say there wasn't the United States at the time, but he didn't land on Florida, what would be Florida, or on what would be the United States, or even North America. He was in on islands, and there were people there already, right? So he discovered something that was already discovered, and it would be very easy because the people were there already, so they were already able to eat and survive, right? So he didn't land on a barren rock or a place with no existing food supply or, well, unfortunately, labor supply. But so certainly his discoveries, which for which he gets so much credit, well, he certainly had crew on 3 ships and funding from Spain and all of the indigenous peoples who he would eventually abuse and worse. So Columbus Day, I'm personally not a fan, but he's just another example of someone who gets credit for the many accomplishments of many others. So this is where there's almost certainly a benefit to teaching the history of and not relying on tropes, I guess, the history book tropes that are, I guess, approved by school boards and whatnot, but by actually understanding how facts fit together through history and who those giants were, so to speak, some more fundamental understandings are almost certainly possible. And where would we be today? So my assertion for today's episode is that the tools we have at our disposal work, right? You can certainly you can start at Wikipedia or any number of other websites and conduct your own fact follow-up. You can do some checking. You can do a historical deep dive, and you can find out who invented gunpowder and when, and Werner von Braun and rocket science, and why is the line between space and not space where it is, and who sets it in which place on the Earth, and what was up with Edward Jenner and smallpox and chickenpox vaccination and that first little kid, I think he was 12 years old, right? You can find all this stuff out. The question is, why do people, generally speaking, not do that? Why are we still faced with what you could say is common knowledge? The Columbus example is really accidentally ideal as an example, because today, and by the way, I picked that up because I listened to This Day in History on my smart speaker product in the mornings. So on this day in history, Columbus, this and that, this and that. So he gets a lot of attention to this day, even though, generally speaking, he's not really considered a good person anymore. If you really look at the best he, in his grave somewhere, the best he should be hoping for is that people just let it go, right? Let's just drop the whole thing. Really, though, I think it's much worse than that. But without understanding the history and how he got the attention that he got, what have we actually learned, and why are we celebrating something that is actually ridiculously inaccurate, a misrepresentation of his achievements? And this, you can start opening cans of worms about statues and celebrating people for their accomplishments and then misdeeds. So it starts to you're pulling on a thread at that point, and your sweater will unravel very quickly. But it is still ridiculously important to understand where things come from and how they are achieved, how they're made, and to understand sometimes that things are not always based on a good story. Maybe there's a happy ending, but not everything is delightful, no matter how much we wish to wash and clean and sanitize that story. So yes, the assertion then I would make today, and is one that I would very much like to have a conversation about, is that the tools that we need to construct these, maybe a narrative, exist. We are not using them. We rely, in my opinion, far too heavily on storytelling, and without stories that are, we have the technology now to link stories or to construct a complete narrative from different pieces of content, if you will, right? You can construct a timeline of the history of rocketry. And if at any point somebody says, well, I just want to thank my engineering team, you could look at this timeline, or you could look at a visual representation, which would look like a timeline probably, and know the depth of the gratitude, or at least the credit, or the attribution, at least, that should be shared, because it was not merely customers and employees. So the tools we have at our disposal, and only more coming, augmented reality, VR to a lesser extent, you should be able, and augmented reality doesn't necessarily mean attaching something to your head, but being able to consume content where additional information is provided. It can happen at any time. You could literally have a timeline or some other historical references appear. This has happened, I think, during presidential debates. I think they've attempted to do fact checking live, and that always goes well. But it is possible to integrate streams of information, or anytime we're looking at or consuming history, even if it's right now or now, we can certainly make use of technology at our disposal to fill in those blanks, and that's yet another story for another day about projects and ideas. But on that note, I would very much like to know what you think, because certainly there are people out there that are working, or who are working on platforms. Often things like news platforms are following the story model, sharing anecdotes, the inverted pyramid, the attention based with the clickbait headline and the image that gets attention and all that. So those are very interesting. But when you are constructing historical timeline references and whatnot to craft what should be an accurate timeline, notion, narrative, picture of how something formed, how would you do that? I have some ideas, and I would that I will save for a conversation for another time. So today's episode of the FFS Talk podcast is going to be not as long as usual, which is probably good for everybody. It just really it was a topic shouting at me to listen to Bezos and the aftermath, the commentary, which again was focused on his hat. But I think it's far too easy to forget the story and to rely on the headline, and by story I mean the backstory, right? The historical references. And I think it's something that we could, as a society and as beings, we could all benefit from knowing more about how we got here. And I'm all for using the tools at our disposal to make that happen. So come on down. Tell me what you think. And it doesn't even have to be about this topic arc. It could be about a variety of things that have appeared thus far, and there will be more. You can drop me an email. For right now, it's just me. Drop an email to join, as in join the conversation, join at ffstalk.com. You can subscribe to the show notes. That would be great. ffstalk.substack.com. I'm actually going to, because I always forget this, because we have a review profile. So Review is a platform owned by Twitter. It's another newsletter platform, which I'm not totally a fan of, but I'm using it anyway. So yeah, ffstalk.substack.com. The show notes are published as a newsletter every week. So the newsletter will have some notes and then the link to the actual show, which is presently hosted on Anchor. You can subscribe on Anchor to the RSS feed with your podcast software. You can subscribe to any of the other platforms where they republish. So Anchor, Spotify, some others. The claims on content distribution that are happening in today's podcast hungry days are curious. So we'll see where those go. But eventually the FFS Talk podcast and show notes will all be sourced authoritatively from the FFS Talk website. So for now, the newsletters will continue to exist, but as we continue to grow, look for some technology adoption, not only to self-host and self-publish, but also to create more useful ways to interact on these topic arcs. And it kind of goes along with what I've been talking about, and it will continue to be kind of an experimental, work in progress that follows along with the underlying theme, what works and what doesn't, and what can we do about it. So thank you for listening. You can follow me on Twitter too, ffstalk.com on Twitter. And again, the review newsletter, which is connected to the Twitter account, thus ffstalk.com. The website will be ffstalk.com, and there you go. So yeah, join in the conversation. I would very much like to hear from you. And if you would like to keep track of this and some other projects and how they all fit together, there's what I call an out-of-band profile page on buymeacoffee.com. Why? Well, because I can have a profile page there that is conveniently accessible. It's not Patreon. It's not quite as heavy-handed. But you can certainly contribute to the caffeine supply if you want. There's absolutely no obligation, but the couple of dollars I have received, I have spent quite literally on coffee. I just received 1 day ago, my medium roast Death Wish, after having probably a ton at this point of the dark roast. They've launched a medium roast sometime earlier in the summer. And so I have it. It's good. And I got some Lavazza espresso beans as well. So it is actually literally buying me a coffee, or as more people are participating in this, buying coffee for those folks. There's this podcast. There's Quaggling Sand, where we talk about anything, especially projects that we're working on. And there's HugoFloss.co, the Hugo Floss podcast, also on Anchor. Also with a show notes newsletter on Substack. Are you seeing a pattern? And so if you visit buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo, DANHUGO, you'll see a list of all these things and more projects coming, more not only podcasts and newsletters, which those are maybe going to be joined by some video streaming, but as well some actual application projects. I'm an actual software engineer, not voice talent, as you are no doubt gathering. So all of this and more, buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo. No obligation, but I will happily buy coffee beans if you want me to. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.